Welcome. This is Lisa Picker from Carroll County Public Library. Our program tonight is presented by CCPL and A Likely Story Bookstore. We are delighted to be hosting Brant Cooper, and later Ted Zaleski will be joining us, Carroll's own original great reader, and also the Director of Management and Budget for the county. Please enter any questions you have for Brant in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of our program. Brant Cooper is the New York Times bestselling author of The Lean Entrepreneur and CEO and founder of Moves the Needle. He is a trusted advisor to startups and large enterprises around the world. With more than 25 years of expertise in changing industrial age mindset into digital age opportunity, he blends agile, human-centered design and lean methodologies to ignite entrepreneurial action from the front lines to the C-suite. As a sought-after keynote speaker, startup mentor, and executive advisor, he travels the globe sharing his vision for reimagining 21st century organizations. His latest book is Disruption Proof: Empower People, Create Value, Drive Change. You can order books from the library or purchase your own from our friends at A Likely Story Bookstore. Please join me in welcoming Brant Cooper.
Hi, thank you for having me, Lisa. What an introduction. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to add that we are having some technical difficulties, and we hope to have our interviewer, Ted Zaleski, with us soon. But I'll go ahead and get us started with a pretty easy question, Brant. Why are we seeing so much disruption today?
Yeah, so, in the startup world, in the corporate innovation world, we often talk about disruption as being the startups that are taking over the markets. But, the last year and a half, all of us stuck at home, that was not the disruption. A startup did not cause that disruption. So we're going through a more fundamental change, Lisa, in my mind. And it's akin from when society must have gone through the agricultural world into the industrial world. We're now we're in the midst of this giant change from the industrial age into the, whatever you want to call the modern age, information age or digital age. And so we're seeing just a fundamental restructuring of society. And to be honest, I think that that's also why there's so much volatility and anxiety in the world right now, is because there is this massive change. And basically the 20th century was sort of marked by a time where things were a bit more simpler. Creating products was a bit simpler. And there was mostly technological and operational risk. If I could create a microwave oven and I could make it efficiently enough that people could afford it, then people were going to buy it because that improved your lives. And today, we're just massively interconnected. The digital world means that we're interconnected all over the world. Information and even disinformation moves at the speed of light. We're all carrying around computers in our pockets. And what this means is this interconnected means that the world is just so much more complex than it used to be. And the complexity brings massive amounts of uncertainty. So that's all, I don't know, that seems pretty obvious, right? But the thing is that the way we manage and structure the institutions that we depend on is still based upon that 20th century assembly line mentality. And so what we really need to do is look at our systems and our structures and our processes and figure out what's the right way to organize ourselves in this new crazy ad hoc mesh network world.
How long do you think we've really had trouble with disruption? And do you think we're any better at it now?
Well, I think that, we got good training. So when things were before, it seemed like we were upended, once in a while. Economic collapses or economic downturns happened, 25 years, every 20 or 25 years, something like that. Storms affected, acts of God affected things regionally. You might have supply chain issues, but it would affect one industry. And if you look at, so that was the 20th century is a more simpler word, but if you look at today, ransomware attacks taking down hospital systems in various places in the US, so that the hospital systems aren't functioning at all because of a ransomware attack. You have ships getting stuck in canals that upset global supply chain. Look at all of our, we've got ships sitting out, off of docks right now, and supply chain issues across industries are completely upended. And then you've got the pandemic. And obviously, we've been locked up. We're starting to open up, obviously, but we were locked away for a year, and it completely upended the economy and upended business. We've had 3 major economic downturns in the first 2 decades of the 21st century. So in my view, that's telling us something. It's telling us something that the way we're structured is a little too fragile, but also that these type of events, which were happening before, are now rippling through society. They ripple through all of the economy whenever they happen because of the interconnectivity of the world. So to me, this is the new world. So we have to reestablish how we're going to work in this world if these type of things are going to rock us multiple times in a year even.
It really feels like as soon as you leave your house, or even not even before you leave your house, we're subject to an inaccessibility of things that we used to find, easily available to us. I was streaming something earlier, went from episode 1 to episode 2. Suddenly I get a message saying, sorry, this title is unavailable. However, every other title I clicked on came on fine. Why would that not be available? So I think we're just getting used to, that kind of just basic inaccessibility. Whereas before, everything was really at our fingertips. There was every cookie you could imagine to buy in the supermarket. And now there's voids and there's holes. And we are all feeling it. We're all feeling a little worse for it. So what kind of role do you think disruption plays on us, as humans, our mental health and how we interact with each other as humans?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. It's I think that the uncertainty and the anxiety affects all of us. I think that we don't necessarily know how to put our finger on it. And so I think when something as huge as the pandemic happens, we sort of want to blame everything on the pandemic, supply chain problems. Oh, it's the pandemic, or the anxiety that we're feeling, it's the pandemic. But I actually think it's this broader change. I think that I think that people are questioning their own roles, and they're questioning their place in society. A vast majority of people I interact with want to live meaningful lives, and they want to contribute to the world, and they want to contribute to society, but they also feel like they need to grab onto and hold on to the things that are still certain for them. And so I think that a lot of the tumultuousness in the world really is the changing role of people's lives. And, it affects young people a lot, right? I have 2 daughters in their early 20s, and I think that there's a lot of benefits actually to the connectivity of the world. And I think there's even some benefits to social media. I think that the connectivity, the fact that we're doing this on Facebook and Twitter, the way we can connect is actually really powerful. But I also think that there's human elements and social pressure and all of these other things that create a lot of anxiety in people that are on these platforms. And a lot of it is that, I have this tweet I want to send out where I have a picture of, I don't know if you're probably too young, but the Snuffy Smith cartoons, and Aunt Louise, and I can't remember what her neighbor's name was. And they meet on the back fence of their properties, right? And they share village gossip there, right? So that's like your first conspiracy theory ever shared was, in Snuffy Sniff cartoons, the housewives sharing conspiracy theories across the back fence. We're wired for, sort of these small village brains. We know the information that's important to us based upon the tribe that we were living in. And now we're just inundated by global events and global information. And it's really just too much for us to process, I think. And so I actually think young people are going to be able to deal with this because they've, as they mature and grow older, they're going to be able to deal with it better than us adults because that would have been their whole lives. But it takes them longer to adapt. And we don't have the right education systems and the right amount of creativity and play that allows them to figure this stuff out. Again, we're sort of shoehorning all of this new technology and this new way of living into these old school ways of preparing people for adulthood. So that's sort of the educational element of this disruption. And I actually think I guess I tend to be optimistic. I think this stuff is going to sort itself out. But if we just kind of let it sort out, it may take decades. And that's a lot of pain and a lot of volatility to go through, as opposed to us taking a look at it and trying to, mitigate the downsides and trying to figure out how we can help each other collaborate to come up with solutions to the problems and the anxiety and the uncertainty that we're all facing.
Yeah. As you mentioned, it's not really our native perspective to have a global perspective, right? We have our families. We tend to, when something happens, when it doesn't go right, we take it personally. You can't walk right in and get a haircut today. You're like, why? Why me? Why has this happened to me? So how do you think our leaders can really meet these challenges, and why is disruption so challenging for our leaders?
Well, so I mean, if you look at government or even the leadership in big companies, I mean, they got where they were because they were experts and had lots of knowledge and abilities in a time of more certainty, and they were really brought up and taught that they're supposed to know the answers, right? That's what we look to leaders. You're supposed to know the answers, but there are no right answers, maybe, right? I mean, the world is so complex now that you might have multiple answers depending upon the variables that you're looking at. So you have to actually have a different mindset. You have to have a more exploration mindset. You have to be able to admit, right? This requires lots of vulnerability, which is not the trait we look for in our leaders. You have to admit when you don't know. Because if you admit when you don't know, then so let's go learn. Let's go collaborate together and figure out the solution to the problem. If you pretend to know, then you're going to throw out solutions that may work or may not work. If you just execute in the face of uncertainty, you're likely going to fail. And so there's new traits that we actually need in our leaders: empathy, vulnerability, the ability to empower others. And so we're seeing this in a lot of the corporations. They're moving up the stack, these people with this sort of mindset. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown's Dare to Lead book, which teaches these things: empathy and vulnerability and those type of things, in the service to driving impact, right? It's not just woohoo, can we all sit around and hold hands? It's not a kumbaya moment. It's just a deeper understanding so that we can develop solutions that actually solve for needs, and that we at least understand what the results are, the impact is on the policies that we have. I think, government's pretty tough because you get elected based upon, your ability to convince others rather than the ability to show that you understand how to deal with people or how to be empathetic or vulnerable. So I'm not sure how to solve the political problem. But there is an example in the book of a city manager in the city of Hayward who did absolutely extraordinary things with some of this entrepreneurial spirit that I talk about. And the proof is really in the response to COVID. So within weeks of COVID, before the end of March in 2020, this small city, completely surrounded by Silicon Valley, this small city that is not a particularly wealthy city in the Bay Area, had the first free COVID testing site up in the United States. And it was simply because the city manager had empowered department heads to do things that needed to get done without going through all of the bureaucracy. And so really extraordinary. And there's a number of examples like that in the book, where if you had put the time in before the pandemic, you were actually sort of prepared for the pandemic, even though you didn't know it was coming either.
Yeah, so you gave a great example how disruption can often elicit great responses from leaders who may not otherwise be empowered to come up with that solution, right? But do you think disruption would actually kind of expose the cracks in organizations?
Well, I think it has.
The problems with leadership teams and how they may have flaws in their decision-making processes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the the pandemic is a great example. The first few months of the pandemic, when I was speaking with corporate leaders, the attitude was sort of like, okay, well, we're just going to buckle it down and we're going to ride this out. And you don't really understand the impact of something like the pandemic until a month or 2 months down the road. And sort of this philosophy of just going to ride it out is a very execution mindset. It's a very much that command and control. We're going to go conquer this mountain, and all we got to do is try harder. But the thing is that in the end, the pandemic affected all of their customers. It affected their supply chains. It affected all of these, purely execution, operational parts of their company. And buckling down, there was nothing to buckle down to. Their execution mode, there was nothing to execute on. And so the mindset of the successful people in the face of that sort of change is, okay, I'm in exploration mode. I'm not in execution mode anymore. I have to go figure out how we're going to survive. I got to go figure out what works. I got to go figure out what my customers need. And so it brings you back to this idea of developing empathy, understanding your customers, and running experiments to try to figure out what works, and working in a more agile fashion. And so again, there's examples of companies that did do that. The restaurants that succeeded in your local area are the ones that were able to add delivery or curbside delivery, not the ones that sort of had to do things the way they had always done them. So I think it's the mindset, and in order to survive these endless disruptions, you have to prepare beforehand. You have to have the mindset and institute the training and the structure and the behavior before the disruptions hit, not in the moment that they hit. In the moment that they hit, it's a little bit late.
So that's a great segue for a definition. What is disruption proof? What does it mean to be disruption proof?
So in my view, disruption proof. So I have this rad mindset. Being from SoCal, everything's rad. But it's resilient. And so being resilient is like a palm tree, right? It bends in the wind, but it doesn't break. So there's strength that's inherent in the structure, but there's also this flexibility that's in the structure. So we have to think about the structure of our organizations. We have to consciously being monitoring what's going on in the world, both, again, acts of God, what's happening with manufacturing in China, what do the supply chains look like, where are the storms, what's happening in the startup world, what new technology is being invented, what are the demographic changes that are going on over the next 10 years that might affect how we're addressing the needs of our customers. Being aware of internal factors. How's my team doing? How are my people feeling? They're all working from home now? How connected are they? Are they getting the social needs that do they have space in their home to be able to go to all of their Zoom meetings? I mean, just again, the awareness, the empathy there is not because you're going to be able to solve all of those problems, but allows you to understand what the issues are that are facing your organization. So that's aware. And then the D is dynamic. So based upon all of this information that I'm taking in, can I change what I need to change? Can I change my plan? So there's an agile way of working that allows you to break a project down or a product development down into stages so that there are natural places for you to go like, okay, let's now evaluate how we're doing. Let's check with our stakeholders, check with our customers, take in new information. And if there's a big change that's occurred out there, we have time to change our plans on how we're building the product or executing on a particular project before it's too late, before we've wasted all of the time and money and resources that have gone into that project. So that's the mindset, the RAD mindset: resilient, aware, dynamic, and really it belongs everywhere inside the company. It's something that everybody needs to learn. They won't all go into explore mode, but they all need to be able to deal with the uncertainty that they face.
A lot of people hear disruption proof and they think that might mean that an organization really needs to be nimble or innovative or any of those buzzwords, right? What does that really take for an organization to really be disruption proof?
Yeah, so it's funny. You're right, and it's somehow the word disruption. No matter what comes after it, the word disruption, sort of evokes very specific understanding in people. And so I'm actually not saying companies need to go be disruptive. I'm saying that they are being disrupted, and they will be disrupted on a continuous basis. So to be disruption proof means that you actually have to build your organization in a way that can respond to the disruption so that you can thrive and survive during those interruptions. And so it really begins with behavior change. And I think leaders get this. I just don't think that they know what to do with the information. And so they tend to do these massive reorganizations or these top-down transformation programs, and it never gets to the behavior change. And we have to start. So to me, the way it happens is more of this pincer move where you have the leadership that's bought in and they say, okay, yes, we're going to do this and we're going to fund it. But the change that happens is on the grassroots level. It's on the bottom level, and you work your way up from there. And so the basic change that happens is what I talk about with the 5 E's, that describe that RAD mindset. And so again, this is what everybody needs to learn. So they actually have to go, do some training and do some practicing and figure out how to integrate it into daily lives if possible. And so maybe I'll run through those 5 E's real quickly. So the first is empathy. So I've already talked about that quite a bit. Empathy is not talking to your stakeholders or your customers and doing what they say. It's understanding why they say what they say. It's understanding needs and obstacles and aspirations and desires and things that they hope to accomplish. It's understanding what their background is, why they think the way they do. And we need to apply that both for customers as well as for each other inside companies, for our employees, for our team members, our colleagues, even for leaders. Understand how your leaders work and think will help you help them. So second E is exploration. So this is that idea again where you admit what you don't know and then go seek to find the answer through understanding customers and running experiments and looking at the data. So the third E is leveraging those insights and the data, the evidence to inform your decisions. You don't want the data to make decisions for you, but you want to have the data and the insights help you determine what is the right course of action, or to help you measure whether you're making the right progress, to cut through biases that we all have. You can use evidence to overcome disagreements. If we all agree to abide by the data in a particular experiment, then that's a nice objective way to help us see through where we've got conflict. So the fourth E is equilibrium. And this is establishing a balance between how much exploration and how much execution that we have to do. So one of leaders' biggest fears is that all of this exploration mode and empathy and experiments takes away from hitting our numbers, takes away from the execution mode, when in fact the exploration actually makes us more efficient in our execution. And so there are jobs inside businesses that are mostly known. We're even in tumultuous times, we're fairly certain about how we get to the outcomes that we want. And so they don't need to do much exploration. They still can use those skills to continuously improve and to have the confidence to overcome obstacles when they come up. But it's a continuum across the organization about how you balance in your daily work, how much execution and how much exploration work you're doing. And the final E is ethics. So especially in a digital age, in a digital world, where we can make decisions at a keyboard that affect thousands, if not millions of people, we have to build into our behavior and our processes the ethical guidelines that they live on the corporate websites, all the value statements, but we need to boil those down to the actual behaviors and guardrails in how the human beings inside the company are behaving. And it's not just about managing data. It's about It's about creating value for humans. Our businesses are in business in order to create value for customers. And we need to refocus on that and ensure that what the work that we're doing is actually beneficial to the people, to our stakeholders, to the people that we're in business to serve.
I'll throw another E word out at you, and that's embrace. So earlier you had talked about how some of the younger generations might be set up a little bit better to handle the current disruption that we've all encountered due to the pandemic. Do you think that there is one generation that could exhibit those E's a little bit better than others? Because I know there's definite, if you ask someone in their 60s, what are your ethics? What do you think of our ethics as an organization? They're going to be much different than someone who's 20 years old, right? So how do you think the generations fit in there?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think that there's a famous article written by Milton Friedman back in 1970. The New York Times sort of did a 50-year retro on that last year. And it was super interesting because in a lot of ways, that article, Milton Friedman was a famous conservative economist, and that article was sort of what was a turning point when everybody said, like, listen, we need to just go maximize shareholder value, which is not really what he said exactly, but that was sort of the message that people took from it. And there's this one little line in there that I think is super interesting and completely ignored. And that is that businesses must adhere to laws and social norms. And like when I saw that, I was like, is that really in here? Because nobody talks about that part of it, right? It's like we act as if companies completely ignore social norms, then that's just free market capitalism. But even Milton Friedman understood that you have to adhere to social norms. So to answer your question, social norms have changed a lot over the last 50 or 60 years. I think that there's an ethical reason why we adhere to those norms. They're more inclusive. It reflects the nature of society to be more diverse. But there's just good business reasons to do that. The fact of the matter is that our shareholders are not a homogeneous group. Our customers are not some sort of homogeneous group. An increased diversity and increasing sustainability and all of these things that are considered, social missions or whatever, actually ends up creating better products for more people that over the long term will make our companies healthier. So I think that the generational changes have definitely influenced what those social norms are. And so therefore what I think these businesses are responsible to. I'm not sure how much of the change we're actually going to see until those younger generations are in higher power. But I already sense it. I mean, there's a great case study example in my book. I think it's great anyway, where the bank ING chose this young woman. She was in, I think, her early or mid 30s, had never managed more than a handful of people, and put her in charge of the bank that they had acquired in Turkey, which had been the bank that served the military. And so to me, I don't know how everybody else feels, but just to me, teeing that up is kind of, it's interesting. We're going to put a young woman in charge of a former military bank in Turkey. And what she did was based upon not any program that was above her, but just based upon being, I think, a younger generation who saw the world differently. She put up posters in the building that said, "Come to work as your authentic self." She took down all of she recolored the inside so that it wasn't brown. She tore down the cubicles, opened it up. She decided that she was no longer going to go through and check everybody's expense reports. She said to me, like a quote that I'm paraphrasing, here I'm giving these people, 6-figure budgets, and I'm supposed to be checking, their 3 figures with 2 decimal point, two digits to the right of the decimal point. I'm supposed to be checking those receipts. And so she was just from the get-go trying to develop this trust and this openness and come to work as an authentic person. And we're going to go solve problems together. And the bank was super high performing and became a model inside of ING. They were running experiments and doing empathy work and testing out solutions for other banking units. It was really quite extraordinary. And I think I think it is emblematic of what you're saying, is that there's a diversity, which, when I'm saying diversity, I'm saying a broad definition of diversity. Not only how we look, but our backgrounds and our education and our philosophies, and just the wider the diversity, the more likely you are to come up with solutions that deal with complexity. And so, yeah, I think younger people they're growing up in a world that's already that way, right? We're trying to change, us older people. We're trying to change from the way it was before to this new world, whereas the younger people, this is the world that we live in.
Yeah, I mean, it's really embracing those myriad of viewpoints that come together in a workplace family,
That's
and
right.
empowering individuals to feel like they can voice their opinions in a safe place, right? I'm here, I'm in my 40s, and things are a lot harder now than they used to be. And I look at every promotion I ever had, and I feel like, I knew nothing at the time, knew nothing at all. And I thought I was, you think you're a lot more intelligent, you think you're a lot more prepared than you ever are. And then looking back, you're like, oh, I knew nothing.
No, I totally agree. Well, so I think that the other part of the equation is, I write about in the book that the team is the new unit of work. And again, in dealing with the uncertainty and the complexity, it's not to put solo people out there to solve problems. It's to form a team of smart people. I mean, this is what human beings do. You give smart people a wicked problem. You give them the authority, empower them to solve it with the autonomy and the means of holding them accountable to the mission. They will solve the problem eventually. And so I think that this is the philosophy that we need to embrace. And it's part of that decentralizing, delegating authority down to the edges where the problems exist in the world. And, I think that even in those situations, the part of the diversity is the level of experience. And so you have the new person who's never seen this before. And, maybe 99 out of 100 of the ideas are completely wacky, but just that one might be the winner. And you have people of other, backgrounds and experiences, and you create this social structure where people are held accountable to the work, where if one person has an off day, it doesn't destroy the whole mission. I really think it's the future of work, and allows you to actually take advantage of freelancers around the world, and sort of this whole trend towards the gig economy and that sort of thing. And ultimately, people will be measured based upon their contribution to the impact of the business rather than how many tasks they accomplished over some period of time.
Right. And it's all tied together, like you said, that you really can't go farther as a business if you don't empower employees, if you don't trust them, like the example of the ING new manager. If you're not trusting your employees, you're not going to go any farther, right?
Yep. And what I loved about that is that the C-suite trusted this woman. I mean, to me, so that's it's a pretty extraordinary story.
Yeah, yeah. Was ING new to that area, or
a good question. I don't know if they had a different banking unit in Turkey at the time. Yeah,
if they would have been more open to taking more risks or being perceived as being a more modern company in that climate?
I think what they took over, though, were people that were used to selling to a military in a pretty darn conservative country. And so that's to me part of the extraordinary part.
Very interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to be qualified to write this book?
Yeah, good question. Who knows? Yeah, so I got an economics degree in college, but the reason why I chose economics, to be perfectly honest, was because it had the fewest required number of units. And what that allowed me to do was take a little bit of everything else. I actually stayed in college an extra year, not because I was lacking units. I actually had to petition the college to allow me to take more than the maximum allowed number of units. So I took a little bit of everything: chemistry, calculus, electrical and computer engineering, history, minored in English, sociology, psychology, and of course, economics. And this ran, I'm older than you are, this ran completely counter to what the advice was. The advice back in those days was, no, you got to specialize. And I did the opposite. So I don't know. It's one of those things that you look back and you go, well, what's the thread that pulls together your life? And I think I ended up hopping around to a number of different jobs and ended up being an IT guy back before they taught IT, and then joined my first startup. So before I joined my first startup, I was sort of one of those people that was tossed around by all the managers like a hot potato because I was a terrible employee. And I was a terrible employee because I would never do what anybody told me to do. I wanted to do it my own way. And so then you go into a startup in Silicon Valley, late 90s, and I'm like, wow, there is sort of this arena. There's this area where people are expecting you to just go take the ball and run with it. And they're expecting you to wear as many hats as you must wear in order to get your job done, where it's natural to measure you based upon the impact that you're having rather than just by the number of tasks that you're doing. And so that was really eye-opening to me. And so I did that for 10 years and ended up writing the first book that talked about lean startup and customer development and product market fit and all of these sort of startup-y concepts, because I thought that was just this amazing way to change the world. And it still is. But I also think there's sort of a culture that breeds that is also not right. And so my first 10 years was in the startups, and my last 10 years have been trying to bring some of these ideas to corporate and learning a little bit more about the ecosystems and what's required to empower people, increase diversity, and really get the economy. To me, this is the crux, Lisa, is we have to get companies competing based upon creating value again. And part of it is from an economic policy point of view, antitrust, industrial policy. The government's job really ought to be not creating jobs, but by creating competition, because competition creates jobs. And if companies are forced to then compete with each other based upon creating value, we get back to this time where employees are valued and paid appropriately in order to develop empathy for customers, run experiments, and figure out what works and provide value to the world. And so you have a strong middle class. You have products that are being created that raise the standard of living. You sort of create this virtuous cycle where things get better versus this vicious cycle where the inequality grows and the volatility grows. And so there's a way to reverse this where there's natural incentives that create the good that's in all of us, that allows us to express that and work together to make the world that we all want to live in.
Well, these are sweet, sweet worlds for a library system, because we believe those things as well. One of our ventures will be debuting this winter. It's really a first of its kind concept for a library system. It's called Exploration Commons at 50 East. It's going to be downtown Westminster. It's really going to be a jewel in the center of Westminster. It will have a technical maker space, a professional teaching kitchen, and meeting spaces for collaboration, spaces for networking. So we really hope to enhance that feeling of entrepreneurship, of connecting together, of really, we want all boats to rise.
Yeah, I love that. That. And if you want me to come and mentor or give a talk there, I'd be happy to help.
Yeah. We will be in touch as soon as we open. We've got a couple of questions from the audience that I want to be sure that.
Great. Yeah.
From Victoria, we have, what traits do leaders generally lack or need to employ the most that are most critical in the face of disruption?
Yeah. It kind of depends on, sort of what stage of leadership. I think that the biggest obstacle really is this trust between leaders and their teams. Like the good leaders that I meet have long passed this particular obstacle of I am just going to delegate and empower my people. And those leaders tend to be super proactive and they're strategic, they're outwardly facing. And the ones that are sort of complaining about always fighting fires and they're in too many meetings, those are the ones that tend to be reactive and micromanaging or trying to actually get, individual by individual, get them, more productive or something. And so I think that generally, employees leaders need to take a really hard look at themselves and understand or try to figure out what are the incremental steps that they can take in order to increase trust with their own teams, with their own employees. And so that requires empathy. That requires self-awareness. It requires them to be able to admit when they're wrong and to be able to share when they're wrong and when they failed. And so that requires vulnerability. So again, I'm doing a commercial for Brene Brown's Dare to Lead instead of Disruption Proof, but it's really a great book that demonstrates all of those things. And I think that those are still the traits that, but it needs to be in service to creating trust. And so the trust word I really got borrowing from Jeb Hurley, who's a Texars startup founder, and he's got a platform where he helps leaders gain trust with their teams. And I think it's spot on. I think it's that we can't really delegate unless we trust that those teams are going to be able to accomplish their mission. But there's a lot of work that goes into figuring out what the right missions are and how am I going to hold the teams accountable. So what are the right metrics? And so those are new skills as well, I think.
Yeah. Our next question is from Graham Dodge, and shout out to Magic. They are a partner of ours, and they are really inspired to make Westminster a premier technology hub on the Mid-Atlantic.
Nice.
So Dodge asks, do you think there will be stimulus for businesses that now need to afford readjustments to go back to former business models who may now see their COVID pivots losing money?
So like by stimulus, do you mean will the government support people to go back to their old business models? No, I don't think so. And I actually am not sure that the business models will completely pivot back away. I think that a lot of businesses have learned things from COVID that will be going forward. So I don't think it'll actually come to a hard stop. What I would hope is that those businesses, if they in fact saw benefits from their pivots, that helps them implement that sort of exploration into their normal work. In other words, because again, I mean, my theory is that the next disruption is right around the corner. So we don't want the philosophy of going back to the way it was before, in my opinion. We need to take the lessons of the pandemic and we need them to be mindset lessons, not sort of the physical change lessons. And so hopefully going forward, what we have is a different mindset on how we can build this resiliency and flexibility into the business model.
So that's a look to the future for us in regards to Disruption Proof. What project are you working on next?
Oh, I have no idea. I am not looking past the book, to be honest. And who knows how long that goes on. If everything opens up, then maybe I do a physical tour. I actually miss traveling and speaking to audiences in person and spending, one-on-one time with both startups and small business entrepreneurs, as well as the corporate executives. To me, that's fun. And I was traveling a lot up until February 2020. And I don't think I've been out of California since. I have my first trip to Seattle, outside California to Seattle, in Thanksgiving week. So,
are you nervous?
I'm not, but I will be wearing a mask. I'm definitely one of those people that looked askance at people that wore masks always on the planes. And I'm all like, you know what? I think that they have something there. So
I feel like I'm going to wear one for the rest of my life whenever I travel.
Yeah, totally. No, I feel that way too, to be honest. Why not?
Well, a lot of other countries, on the planet do that.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, Brant, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am sorry for anyone who tuned in, looking forward to see one of Ted Zaleski's very insightful interviews. I hope I did not do us too poorly in representing us. And we want to thank Brant once again for joining us. And we hope you are able to come back when we are able to open Expiration Commons this winter. So
yeah, you did a great job, Lisa. Thanks, and hopefully I get to connect with Ted at some point. And if anybody else has other questions or comments or anything else, feel free to reach out. I respond to all emails. So I'm Brant@BrantCooper.com, and website is BrantCooper.com, and Brant Cooper on all social media. So feel free to reach out. And thanks so much for picking up the ball, Lisa. You did a great job. So it was a lot of fun to talk to you.
Yeah, I was not intending to interview Brant tonight. So, well, thanks everyone for joining us. Be sure to purchase Brant's book, Disruption Proof, when it comes out. It looks like, Brant, you said it looks like it's going to drop November 9th.
Yeah, but pre-order now. You can pre-order right now, and please support your independent bookstore and buy through Sykesville Books. That would be awesome, and that's why I'm doing the tour this way is to help out the independent bookstores. And so, yeah, pre-order now. Awesome. Don't wait.
All right. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Bye.